Nigeria's inflation rate has taken a surprising turn, dropping to 24.48% in January after a rebasing exercise by the National Bureau of Statistics. But what does this mean for the average Nigerian, and how does this new methodology affect our understanding of inflation? Now, joining us in the studio to break down the numbers for us is Professor Uche Uwaleke. He's also the president of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thanks so much, Musa. My pleasure being here.
Beautiful. The MBS has somehow introduced a new rebase inflation rate, which has taken some time, but we are beginning to see the result. Well, that takes into account changes in consumer price spending patterns. Can you help us understand how they arrive at this figure, and what changes were made to actually to this particular methodology?
Yeah, thanks, Musa. I think the starting point is to also correct an impression, and that impression is the fact that prices didn't really drop from 34.8 in December to now 24.48 in January. We didn't witness any significant drop in prices, and that's because of the fact that the figure for December of 2024 was based on a 2009, a price reference period, and that of January of this year was based on 2024. So the price reference period for the two are different, and because they are different, it would not be appropriate to compare them. Otherwise, we will be comparing apples and oranges. So what practically happened is that the MBS came up with a new figure for inflation based on a new methodology. That is what happened, and of course, I would say it's something that has been long awaited. This is again an exercise we expect to happen every 5 years, but for us it has taken time, and the MBS, I want to even start by commending the MBS for coming up with this rebased figure. So what they have done essentially is to move the price reference period, because when you're comparing inflation is this consumer price index is nothing but the change in the price level between one period and the other. Okay, that first period is called the base year. So you try as much as possible to bring it close to the current year for it to properly reflect reality, properly reflect inflationary pressure. So that is what they have done by bringing the price reference period to 2024, which is the year before the current year. The weight reference period, they have used 2023. Again, for obvious reasons, that was the year they did the Nigerian living standard survey. So, so essentially what they have done is to try to ensure that inflation rates numbers, reflect the inflationary pressure that we'll have, in the country. And talking about how they did it, of course, that involved them reassigning weights. They have also used what is called the classification of individual consumption according to purpose. They have updated the one they used. Previously, they were using that of 1999, but they have also, in this rebasing, used an updated version, which is 2018, which has also seen the classification now, move from 12 to 13, and they have reduced the weight for food from about 52% to now 40%. And some others too, while also increasing items like transport, in that classification. So the reassignment of weights, have also led to, what we saw.
Okay, Prof. We agree that somehow reflects the international best practice, but does it actually reflect the realities on ground? And though you said that it's not a reduction from 34 to 24, But does it actually reflect the realities of
Yes,
things?
yes, Musa, you and I'm sure you also go to the market. Yes, prices are still high, prices are still elevated. The difference is that they may not be, the increase in prices we are witnessing now may not be as high as we know they used to be, which is also what the MBS chief executive tried to explain. That is not as if the prices are coming down, no. But what is happening is that the rate at which they are rising is slowing. Okay, that is also why you have inflation rate at 24.48. So it's still rising, but at a slower pace. So of course, Nigerians will tell you that prices generally are on the high side. But let me even say this: that even with the old method, there was this expectation that January inflation figure would moderate, below the, that of, December. So what has happened now is that the MBS has properly captured that, increase in prices. Okay, yes, it is rising, but at a slower rate. I've also heard that in some parts of the country, for example, maybe in the northern part of the country, the price of grains are coming down. They're not as high as they used to be. I also hear that palm oil, for example, is also not as high as it used to be. Yes, on the general note, prices are rising, but not as high as they were in 2024.
Okay, we saw a drop in food. You talked about prices of grains. We saw a drop in food inflation to 26.08%. What's driving this trend? And can we expect further decreases much later in the year?
Yes. Whether we are looking at the old or the new, if you notice, in both of them, the food still has the bulk of the weight. Because at the end of the day, it is the expenditure, household expenditure on a particular item, relative to total consumption. That is how those weights, came about. So food in the current one is 40, and 40 is still heavy. Okay, so you now find that what happened was a case of, the MBS said anything to do with restaurants or meals away from home, they now removed from the initial classification. So that's why the food component dropped. But you also find that in the restaurant component increased from 1.2 to over 12%. So food is still a major challenge. So going forward, the best way to still reduce inflation in the country today is by the fiscal side again, doing something in the area of continue to enhance food output, agri, okay, including through, of course, dealing with insecurity. Okay, once insecurity is substantially dealt with, it will of course enable farmers to go to farms, and then you should also expect increase in output. Then tied to that is not just food output. There's also the need to also reduce the cost of transport by, as much as possible, not only by providing infrastructure, the rural roads, okay, but by also ensuring that even the cost of fuel, comes down, significantly. Because when you reduce the cost of transport, if you notice in this new method, the weight of transport has increased. So if you reduce the cost of transport and you increase food output, so that farmers can also take the food from farm gate to the market, you can be sure that inflation rate will come down. So to go about it, deal with food, deal with transport, and to a large extent housing, because these are the three major contributors of inflationary pressure we have in Nigeria. And I think that going forward into 2025, I want to expect that before the end of the year, we are likely to see substantial reduction in inflation rate.
Talking about reduction in inflation rate, Prof, one of the key assumptions of the 2025 budget is that the target of actually bringing down inflation to 15%. How feasible is that?
Yeah, yes. Whether we are likely to get to 15%, okay, of course, it's not something one can predict at this moment. But the fact remains that we are certainly going to see substantial reduction, in inflation rate in 2025, especially looking at particularly if the budget is implemented, the agri components implemented, the capital components implemented. You look at the 2025 budget, okay, even with the recent reduction, 500 billion reduction in capital, the bulk of the allocation this time around, a significant allocation is going to capital. And if it is going to capital, you should expect that will rub off positively on inflation. Most of the time is when you put more money on recurrent, and then you also borrow money. That is when you find inflation going up, interest rates are going up, and so on. But with what we have seen now, what is likely to happen tomorrow by the time the central bank, the governor briefs
that was what I was just about to actually ask.
Yes, you're likely to see the MPC members holding the rates, okay? And possibly before the end of the year, maybe even change their stance from aggressive, from the tightening stance to, accommodative, or even, to losing. And that is because of the fact that the pressure, coming, from inflation is likely to, to reduce.
Okay. Now the core inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, rose to 2.24% in December. What does this tell us about underlying drivers of inflation? Should we be worried?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that MBS has also introduced a number of indices, that will also facilitate decision making. You realize that MBS has also introduced the energy index, the services index, the goods index, imported food index, the farm produce index. They were not all there before. So the fact that they have introduced the energy index will also, better help in tracking. And that's why initially I said, if we must bring down the cost of transport, okay, the fuel price must really come down. Yes, we welcome the competition that is now going on between Dangote and NNPC, but we need to see more, significant reduction in the, pump price of fuel, because that will, translate to, reduced prices generally. Cost of transport is a major input in the, inflation number, and if you can reduce the cost of transport,
with the Nassau State University, it's always a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you so much, Musa.